Episode 56. Greg Palast. Voting in a U.S. election soon? This episode's for you. Greg Palast is an investigator, reporter, and filmmaker. He's worked for The Guardian and covered the election integrity beat in the U.S. for 25 years. His newest work, Vigilantes Inc., is about the type of voter suppression to expect in 2024. Please welcome to the show, Greg Palast. Greg Palast, good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been too long.
I know,
or too
right?
short, because here we are talking about jacking with the elections again. My God, when are we going to stop this?
No kidding. So real quick before we dive in, I got to point out that it's interesting that we're recording the day we're recording, because it actually happens to be my dad's birthday, the day that we're recording.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Yeah, well, he's a big fan of yours, so it's it's ironic.
Unfortunately, that's my demographic. half my listeners are in walkers, guys. Even in walkers, we can kick ass, right? Okay, thanks.
So I want to spend the first part kind of getting to know a little bit about the man behind the work, and then, of course, we're going to dive into 2024 and everything you've been up to. So to start, what got you into journalism?
Anger, resentment. I was an investigator. Well, first of all, let's start from the beginning. I grew up in Sun Valley, Pacoima, the poorest neighborhood in Los Angeles, between the sewage plant and the garbage dump. It is still the poorest neighborhood in Los Angeles. And even at a young age, I knew someone did this to us. We didn't fail. We weren't uneducated or any of that crap. Some billionaires did this to us. And I wanted to find the names of those sons of bitches and call them out, expose them, pull down their pants. So I started out as an economist. An investigating economist, where I did big racketeering cases and other cases against bad guys. And then when I realized that the U.S. media was not covering the stories, I did the investigation, the Exxon Valdez breakup. They got that wrong. Nuclear. I did the investigation of the nuclear power industry for the Justice Department. Media got that wrong. So I said, the hell with it. I'm going to become a journalist and write this stuff up myself. So I sent out some stories, and I got a call when I was about 44, 45 years old from The Guardian newspapers in Britain, said, get your ass on a plane right now. We need to hire you as an investigative reporter. And that's how I started as an investigative reporter late in life. And then BBC Television hired me as an investigative reporter. In fact, I did my first investigative film when I was 50. And wrote The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, came out on my 50th birthday. So you could say I'm a late bloomer, but I'm a late puncher. I want to punch these guys in the frickin' face, and that's what I do. That's how I got in.
How did you eventually get into election integrity, which has been, very prominent in your work as of recent?
Yeah, 25 years of following what we politely call vote suppression. And as I say in my film, Vigilantes Inc., when your car gets stolen, you don't say, my car's been suppressed. My car's been suppressed. Your car's been stolen. But if I say stolen, I will be pulled off every site, all the socials. I'll be blocked from talking in America. We have to use the polite term vote suppression. Vote suppression is a polite term for screwing black people out of their votes. Okay, let's get to what it is. And we can't talk about that in America. And the New York Times has run some stories about vote suppression, but have you ever in your entire life read a story from the New York Times or the Washington Post saying that vote suppression actually changed an election, that an election was stolen by stopping black people from voting or not counting their votes? Never. They will never say that, because Joe Biden said anyone who questions American elections is undermining democracy. Well, screw you, Joe Biden. That's why you shouldn't be reelected president anyway. You don't give a damn about black voters, Hispanic voters, Asian American voters, American native tribal voters. You couldn't give a damn if they get screwed out of their votes, even if it means you lose the presidency. And he came within 44,000 votes of losing it. And if it wasn't for my group, and if it wasn't for the activists in the black community, the Asian community, the American native community, that guy would have been a retired senator. So that's the problem. The problem is Joe Biden. The problem is the Democratic Party. The problem is the mainstream media, which has said you can't talk about American elections except to say, oh, we're so wonderful. We're not like Putin. And we aren't like Putin. We don't actually jail or murder our opponents. We just don't let black people vote. That's what it's about.
So what would you say, if you had to just kind of pick one, what would you say was the most in-the-face, egregious example of voter suppression? I mean, for me personally, 2000 comes to mind, but what would you say kind of takes the cake if you had to pick just one?
Okay, 25 years of doing this. Absolutely, it's this year, 2024. This new business of vigilante voter challenges. Now, most people don't know what it is because your lamestream media won't cover it. Thank you, Ron, for covering it. It's in my film, Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitman. It is the worst. Now, I will give credit to Kamala Harris for hiring one of the top voting rights lawyers in America who's screamed, Mark Elias, who's screamed about these vigilante vote challenges, and that's what my film's about. What it is I can say, by the way, what state do you live in, Ron?
California.
Oh, no. Yeah. I can say Ron Placone does not live in California. Don't let him vote. Don't count his ballot. I can do that as an individual citizen in 43 states in the United States. You can challenge a voter. Any voter can challenge another voter's right to vote. But what the Trumpsters have figured out this time for 2024, and Mark Elias, Kamala Harris, I will give her credit for hiring him, said the number one threat to the 2024 election are these vigilante challenges in which not the government, but I, as an individual, Greg Palast, say, don't let Ron Placone vote. And they say, what the hell is that? That goes back to 1946 in Jim Crow laws, when the Ku Klux Klan incorporated itself as Vigilantes Inc., which is why we get the name for the film, Vigilantes Inc., because it's come back. So the Klan plan in 46 was to challenge every black voter in Georgia, and they successfully removed enough black voters to elect a Klansman, Eugene Talmadge, as governor of Georgia. Except the difference between 1946 and today, in 1946, that was considered illegal, and the governor was about to be arrested. The FBI drafted an indictment, but he got saved from going to prison because he had a collision with a bottle of bourbon and drank himself to death just before he's about to be arrested. But today, the Trumpsters have taken the Klan plan and made it to the Trump plan. Now, I'm not being partisan. I don't care if you vote for Trump or Stein or Kamala or whoever the hell, Cornel West, if you're really a nutcase.
You don't like Cornell? Yeah, I like Cornel West.
You know what? Here's my problem. When you go to McDonald's, you can't order. When you go to McDonald's, you can't order sushi. In America, you got two choices. Pick your flavor. It's vanilla or chocolate. You can't say, I don't like these choices. I want strawberry. I want strawberry. I'm going to cry. I'm going to stamp my feet. And I'm going to demand that you give me strawberry. Well, you can't. It's chocolate or vanilla. Gang, wake up.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we do have the Electoral College, though. So as a Californian,
the Electoral College is
it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing, but as long as we got it.
Yeah, as long as John Quincy Adams has said the Electoral College is for Masons, Jews, and anarchists and troublemakers. So that protects us from the anarchists and the Jews. And the Masons. So we are protected from Jews and Masons through the Electoral College, but it means that you've got to choose between vanilla and chocolate, like it or not. But that's not my point. My point is what they're stopping. If you want to vote for Cornell, you want to vote. He's a friend. Jill Stein, she's a friend. Fine. That's not the point. The point is whether you're allowed to vote. And if you are a voter of color, look out, because this new vigilante voter game, dig this, and you'll see this in our film Vigilantes Inc. In 2020, there were a Trumpite group True the Vote. They're the ones that issued that crazy-ass film, 2,000 Mules. And that film, 2,000 Mules, launched from Mar-a-Lago by Donald Trump, claimed that 2,000 black men, and they're very clear that it was only black men. 2,000 black men were stuffing drop boxes with forged ballots. And that has led to them signing up all these people as voter vigilantes. There were 88 in Georgia in 2020. Ready for this, Ron? This group, True the Vote, who works with Donald Trump, has signed up 40,000 vigilantes for the 2024 election. As of 6 weeks ago, I checked. They had already challenged 851,000 voters, and they're on their way to 2 million. If you go download my film, you'll get an introduction by Martin Sheehan, my favorite president, President Bartlett, who tells you that this is the biggest danger we've had. And I will say Kamala Harris's voting rights guy said this is the number one danger, this virus out of Georgia. 851,000 voters, and I guarantee you that 97% of them have no idea that their vote has been challenged, have no idea if they mail in their ballot, it will not be counted, have no idea if that they show up to vote on election day, they'll be told, sorry, you have to not, you don't get to vote here, or they'll give you something called a provisional ballot. Ron, a provisional ballot is a placebo ballot. It's not a real ballot. It makes you think you voted, but you haven't. I don't care if the lady behind the desk says, oh, well, just fill this out and they'll check your registration. They'll check your registration, find out you've been challenged, you don't get to vote. Your ballot will not count. So now we're exposing this in this film, Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitman. And I want to tell you, this is really important. Leonardo DiCaprio, bless him, with Jamie Foxx, has created a site for us, and he's funded us so we can give you the film for free. Go to saveyourvote.org. Saveyourvote.org. Now, why do you call saveyourvote.org as opposed to like watch this movie? The answer is the first thing you get is a button that says check your registration. Now, I got to tell you, you'll see in the film. And I say, oh, I've been voting in the same place for 20 years. I don't care. You'll see in the film a elderly woman. She's voted at the same voting station for 50 years. I was there in Georgia when she tried to vote. And they said, your name's on the voter rolls. Get out. And they sent her out into a storm. Her granddaughter was hysterical. You'll see this on the film. I was right there. And they said, her name's not on the voter rolls. Because they said she doesn't live in Georgia anymore. So I went down the street to her home in Atlanta. And there on the wall was a picture of Martin Luther King having dinner at that house. I said, you knew King? And she said, he's my cousin. He came here every Sunday after services for dinner. So if they can remove Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin, who's voted in the same place for 50 years, you better check your registration. And you better go to save your, not my vote, not Ron's vote, your vote with a Y, yourvote.org. And you can check your registration. You get 800 numbers. If you run into trouble, we got flying teams of lawyers. We got advice on how not to get challenged by the vigilantes, but we also give you a free link to stream the film for nothing. And I want to warn you, it's not a film of white guy. It's not PBS. It's not white guys in front of bookcases. I know I'm a white guy right now in front of a bookcase, but what you will get is you will get a story that's entertaining. So bring your popcorn, because the one thing about the film, it's a movie and it's entertaining because I want you to feel it, understand it, and know it. And that's why we did it that way. Okay. So go ahead.
What's something, and my motivation behind this question is like thinking back to your work in 2016, where you talked about how that there were the purging of voter rolls in Michigan, which of course made a huge difference in the results. I'm no fan of Hillary. I'm certainly no fan of Trump either. But that's not the point. But going through all that and seeing the work you were doing, and then seeing that pretty much get ignored. Well, simultaneously, they talked about memes out of St. Petersburg, Russia for 4 years and counting. Meanwhile, this actual stuff that's going on at the polls was kind of being ignored. What do you think is kind of the biggest thing Americans miss when it comes to election integrity?
Yeah, well, obviously we aren't Putin. He had the Nemtsov, Alexei Nemtsov, who was shot in the back of the head in front of the Kremlin. So we don't shoot our opponents in the back of the head. we simply disqualify their voters. In America, we're much more subtle. We don't shoot people in the back of the head. We don't jail like Navalny. We don't jail our opponents in Siberia. We simply don't allow their voters to vote. And so this is the issue here. Now, in 2016, I did a film, which, by the way, you can also download for free. It's a lot of fun, a lot of animations. It's a lot of humor. It's a lot of dark stuff, too. The best democracy money can buy. And we exposed a system called interstate cross-check, where you had this guy, this right-wing nutcase from, well, I can't call him a nutcase. He's the attorney general today of Kansas. Combined, he's Trump's supposed election fraud investigator, and Brian Kemp, who's the governor of Georgia. And they got together, and with 30 states all together, they compared voter rolls to make sure that people didn't vote twice in two different states. Now, they got praise from NBC and ABC and every newspaper said how wonderful this is. But I actually sued Brian Kemp and got the lists of people they were knocking off. And there's an awful lot of people named Jose Garcia. Awful lot. In fact, they said that one guy in Georgia voted 238 times. His name was James Brown. He said, well, wait. Maybe there's a lot of James Browns in Georgia. I mean, it's a common name. Well, it's not a common name for a Republican. Neither is Jose Garcia. So what happened is you had James Lewis Brown, who's supposed to be the same voter as James Henry Brown, supposed to be the same voter as James Brown the third, is supposed to be the same voter as James Brown the second. Now, after we did our film, we ran it around the country. And Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, Rainbow Push, made it a crusade with a little help from a guy, Bernie Sanders, who's a member of the Congressional. By the way, who's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. You don't have to be black to be in the Congressional Black Caucus. I kind of noticed him. He got this big guy.
He is a tall dude.
Stood out. Anyway, with the campaign, we were able to defeat it. We got that thing shut down. I worked at the ACLU. I worked at the League of Women Voters. I worked with Black Voters Matter. I worked with Rainbow Push, and we got that thing shut down. Well, the problem is we got one thing shut down in 2016. By the way, that's where Hillary Clinton lost her election. Remember, she only lost by 70,000 votes in 3 states. If it weren't for interstate crosscheck, she would have been president.
Right.
Now, we have this new election where so it's whack-a-mole. We get rid of one thing and they come up with another thing. So they come up with vigilante voting. The thing about the vigilante voting, it's terrifying, it's ugly, it's violent, but it's also a lot of fun to watch the film.
How would you say the United States ranks as far as election integrity compared to just other places in the world, places in Europe, the UK, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, if you don't know me, I was a reporter for The Guardian and the investigative reporter for BBC Television. So I lived in Britain 4 years. And they can't believe this crap that we do in America. They thought we were a democracy. Everyone knows about the Electoral College, which is anything but democratic.
Right.
But even beyond that, this idea that you stop people from voting. Places, I mean, I spent a lot of time in places like Switzerland. They don't have voter registration. They assume that if someone walks in to say, I'm a citizen, I'm a voter, they don't ask for your ID. They don't ask for anything. They just assume, because you know why? Because vote fraud by voters doesn't exist. They're the victims of vote fraud voters, but people aren't willing to go to jail for 5 years. It's a felony. It's a federal crime to cast an illegal vote. And in most states, that's 5 years, and you add the state law, and you're going to be in the can for 10 years. Who's going to risk 10 years in prison to cast a single vote somewhere? It's beyond ridiculous. But the problem is that excuse that there's massive fraud, massive voter fraud, has driven this whole horseshit about illegal voters. We have to stop black people from voting because they vote twice. They vote illegally. They vote in several states. That's what black people do. In fact, you'll see in our film, we show that film that Trump launched called 2,000 Mules by the group that launched the Vigilantes called True the Vote out of Texas. And we take it apart. But the problem is it's a replay of another film that was made 100 years ago in 1920 called Birth of a Nation, in which was a Ku Klux Klan propaganda film, which showed black voters. It's not black voters, I should say. It's white actors in blackface sneaking in extra votes into a ballot box. We show that in our film. And then we show how they showed the same thing. Black voters supposedly adding extra ballots to the ballot box. They show again and again and again this black man putting 5 ballots in a ballot box. Well, it turns out his name is Mark Andrews, and he did put 5 ballots in a ballot box, his own, his wife's, and his 3 kids' ballots. And he's now sued the distributor of the film, Sinclair Media, to a fare thee well. A legal voter, but all they did was show a black man sticking ballots into a ballot drop box, and automatically he must be a criminal. In fact, in that film, in the Trump promoted film, it says you're witnessing O.J. Simpson leaving the scene of the crime.
Oh,
a black man putting ballots in a ballot drop box for his family is O.J. Simpson, a murderer. So if a black man is voting, he must be a murderer. That's what's happening in America. It's ugly, but it's watch this. It's entertaining. Go to saveyourvote.org, or you can always see my name, Greg Palast, in the lower screen. If you get that, you can go to gregpalast.com, get the film for free, but also get my updated reports. And we want to spread this link around because we have to warn people. The only reason Joe Biden got elected in 2020, by the way, we did an early version of the film that was just based on Georgia. It's a short version. And we were able to warn enough people who had been challenged by these vigilantes to re-register, save their vote. And we were able to convince some elections officials, including Republicans, that this stuff is just ugly, racist Jim Crow crap. But unfortunately, this year they changed the law again so that even the Republican county officials who refuse to accept these challenge lists have no choice now. So it's going to be an ugly time, and it's going to be a real fight, especially in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. They've already started these massive, massive voter challenges. Not by the government. I want to repeat that. It's not the government. It is instead these individual vigilantes.
So how in recent years, kind of getting into what's going on contemporarily, how have you faced the challenge of, sometimes it's like the narrative is just hijacked, by these fringe interests. And so how do you come across, I challenge election integrity, I do investigations, and then people go, so you're a stop the steal guy or something like that? Like how do you differentiate yourself from, the absurdity, which is like, we have a ton of election integrity issues, but stop the steal was, just absolutely batshit ridiculous. So how do you draw that line and kind of pull other people in?
It's frickin' murder.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the problem. The Democratic Party is split. Most of the Democratic Party does not want you to mention vote suppression or stopping people from voting. Most Democratic Party is chicken shit. Okay, and they will not protect your vote. They don't protect the vote of black people because why don't they protect their black voters? The answer is because the Democratic Party is just all the parties are one party. It's the party of incumbency. And the guys who were elected by the Democratic Party were elected in primaries with the current voter list. If you suddenly allowed black people to vote, you suddenly allowed American natives to vote, you'd have a very different Democratic Party. Let me tell you that. Okay. So that's very important. I mean, you'd have more Joe Bidens and fewer Kamala Harris's, right? So here's the story. It's very difficult. In fact, my site was shut down by the Democratic Attorney General of Michigan because I was talking about black voters losing their vote in Michigan. And she reversed herself after she got a group that's pretty much similar to the ACLU in Michigan, said, hey, Greg Palast's work actually helps Democrats. And they said, we made a mistake. We'll put your site back up. You can't, like I said, Joe Biden has said anyone who questions an American election's results is undermining democracy. Well, when Trump says the election was rigged, I say the election was rigged. When he says the election was rigged, I say, of course it was, because you and your cronies rigged it, Donald. But it's very difficult for me to get the mainstream media to say that voters of color are being shafted. And I can tell you, in my film, you'll see one scene where 130,000 voters were challenged in the state of Michigan. And we took the challenge sheet and showed all the precincts with challenges and all the precincts with black voters in Milwaukee. And there was an exact match between the voters challenged and the black voters in Milwaukee. Now, the graph that you'll see in the film was made for me by the Washington Post. So I was going to write this story for the Washington Post on how black voters are being challenged illegally, who are legitimate voters, because I got them on the phones. I went to their houses. But the Washington Post spiked the story. But you'll see it in my film. I will say the only reason why Biden is president is because I then wrote a report for the ACLU and Black Voters Matter saying that this whole purge list was a phony piece of crap. And I will say that the nonpartisan election board of Wisconsin rejected this whole purge that they were going. If it not for that, Biden would not have been elected. And so, but I don't expect Biden to say, hey, thanks, because I don't care about some politician. I don't care if Biden's elected or not. I was trying to save people's votes. That's what it's about. And that's what Biden attacked. So my first, I'm not afraid of Donald Trump. I'm afraid of Joe Biden.
You mentioned the Washington Post nixing your story.
Yes.
How often has stuff like that happened with the corporate media in the United States with you?
100% of the time.
Yeah.
Almost. Close, maybe 90. Here's the thing. When I broke a story back in 2000 when Gore was running against George W. Bush. And if you remember, Al Gore lost the presidency to Bush by 537 votes in Florida. I'm not talking electoral votes, 537 votes in one state, which determined the outcome of the election. I busted that story in the Guardian newspapers and on BBC television. Top of the nightly news, front page of the major paper in the world. The Guardian is the most prestigious paper in the world. No one reads the New York Times. It's crap. So I was in the top media of the rest of the world, in which I discovered that before the election, Jeb Bush, the brother of George Bush running for president, that Jeb Bush ordered the removal of roughly 58,000 black men from the voter rolls. 58,000 black men from the voter rolls, saying that they were felons. And ex-cons at that time could not vote in Florida. And I got to tell you, I went to the attorney general. I said, here's your arrest list. How many of these 58,000 black men? And I'm not guessing because it said BLA next to their names. I'm not guessing. It has their race next to their names on these purge lists. And I said, how many of you arrested? He said, well, we looked at 6 cases, but it's none. None of these people, not one of them are an illegal voter. But that's how George W. Bush got elected president. And it was the front page of papers all over the world. I got a note from Noam Chomsky that he saw the headline on page one in a paper in India. This is all over the world except the United States.
Oh my
it
God.
Wasn't in a single mainstream newspaper in the United States, except, the LA Times said Democrats accuse Republicans of removing black people. No, it's not Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a reporter. And one thing that I am as a reporter, an American, those guys you see on camera and those bylines you see in U.S. papers, they're not reporters. They're repeaters. They work from press releases. And that's why they said Democrat first, because it's a cheap, crappy way to do journalism. You call up the Republicans and you say, Democrats have accused you of this. And they say no. And then the Republicans have accused you of this. Oh, no. Okay. On one side this and one side that. That's not reporting. That's repeating. And I cannot wait for these newspapers to collapse. I've been so thrilled to watch American newspapers go under because we don't want this garbage going to our house. When you have a sewage pipe that's broken going into your home, You close the sewage pipe. Okay, so close the American news sewage pipe and go to gregpalast.com. Get this movie, get the reality, get the facts, man. The facts that you can see at BBC or The Guardian. I also worked at Al Jazeera. I mean, not all these sites are wonderful or perfect. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying compared to the American media, oh my God, we don't get the stories about what happens to black people. I should get to the film at some point. Okay, go ahead.
So as we're wrapping up here, this is going to drop right around the time people are going to go to vote. So what are kind of some tips of the trade that you want to give to folks as they're going to the ballot box?
Number one, go to gregpalast.com. Number one, actually, that's number two. Number one is go to saveyourvote.org. And the first link you'll get, it says, check my registration. Now, a lot of people have gone there. I can't tell you how many people said thank you because they've been registered for 20 years and they suddenly find out that their name is purged or gone or challenged and they can't get their ballot in the voter roll. So you check your registration. And right now, you have in some states, you have a couple days to still register. And by the way, in Nevada, Wisconsin, California, I think North Carolina, you can register on election day. So one thing they don't tell you is that if you show up at the polling station, they say, well, your name's not on the voter roll, so you've been challenged or you're purged or whatever. Say, well, give me a registration form right now. If you're in Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, California, say, give me a registration form right now. Register on the spot. Say, now give me a regular ballot because I'm a registered voter. That's the second thing you do. You learn these things at Save Your Vote, not Save My Vote, not Save Our Vote, saveyourvote.org. And then finally, you can get and then we have the 800 numbers, the 866 number to have flying teams of lawyers if they're still giving you a bunch of crap. And finally, you can stream the film for free. Vigilantes Inc., America's new vote suppression hitmen. And you can meet some of these vigilantes. One of them actually dresses like a vigilante. You think he's a nutcase with his cowboy boots and cowboy hat. And he literally wears a holster, as you'll see, with a loaded 6-gun in it. And you might think this guy's just a nut. Well, he may be just a nut, but he's also chairman of the Republican Party in Southern Georgia, And he personally challenged 4,000 voters, most of them African-American soldiers at Fort Benning who were assigned to other bases. So he said, they've gone to Afghanistan. They shouldn't be allowed to vote. They don't live in Georgia. No, believe it or not, a soldier who is assigned to Afghanistan is allowed to vote, even if they're a black voter. Almost all these voters he challenged were black, including Major Gamaliel Turner. You'll meet him, a 70-year-old career military man who was assigned to Fort Hueneme in California, and they wouldn't give him his ballot from Georgia because they said he was challenged by this guy who pretends he's a vigilante. He thinks he's Doc Holliday. And this Major Turner ultimately had to fly 5,000 miles round trip to get justice and get his ballot counted. That's what's going on. And you'll see that in the film.
Have you ever been handed a provisional ballot?
Yes. And
that doesn't surprise me.
Well, I have to say that was a rare thing. I remember going to the Palm Springs book fair, and there were about 200 people in the audience. And I said, has anyone here been given a provisional ballot? There were only 2 black men in the entire audience. Those 2 black men raised their hand. They were the only people, the only 2 black men in the audience were the only 2 people who have received a provisional ballot. Let's put it this way. If you're black, Hispanic, or Asian American, the chance you will be handed a provisional ballot is 300% higher than if you're white. This is the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission. Second, the U.S. Civil Rights Commission did an investigation, found out that the chance of your ballot, once you've been given that provisional ballot, or there's other challenges to your ballot, the chance your ballot will be disqualified, not counted, is 700% higher if you're black than if you're white. And here's a number I bet. By the way, Ron, how many provisional ballots do you think were rejected in the last presidential election? If you win this, I'll give you a free copy of the film.
How many? Oh, wow. All right. Let me go with 200,000.
You. How naive. There were 10 million provisional ballots handed out.
Wow.
And according to U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, which keeps the statistics, you're off by a factor of 12. It was 2.7 million provisional ballots were rejected. 2.7 million provisional ballots rejected. And remember, you're 300% more likely to get one of these ballots if you're non-white, and 700% more likely to have your ballot rejected. So let me put it this way. Hillary Clinton's victory was in that provisional ballot dumpster. And if it weren't, it was slim as could be. Remember that Biden just won back the presidency by 40,000 votes out of 180 million cast. So this new vigilante challenges, shunting people to provisional ballots, all the other trickery. Go to see Vigilantes Inc., America's new vote suppression hitman. It is free at gregpalast.com, where you can still get my updated reports. There's no charge. I don't inundate you about once a week. I send out stuff. And then the second thing is go to saveyourvote.org. I keep pushing that because I really want people to check their registration, get the information they need to protect their vote, and watch the film, and then send the link out to every person you know anywhere, but especially in those battleground states, because that's where voters of color are being targeted.
Greg, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Hey, I really appreciate that you've given me this way to work around the lamestream media of America. You know, like I said, people say, well, you're not in the mainstream. Yeah, I am. BBC and The Guardian are the mainstream of this world in the English language, but not in my home country. So thank you for allowing my voice to come home. Thank you.
That was Greg Palast. Go to saveyourvote.org. Feel like Greg has a film he wants everyone to see. He is the master of the plug, that guy. But yeah, seriously, check it out. It's amazing. You can watch the film for free. SaveYourVote.org. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. I'll be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/romplacone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content. I'm doing Zoom shows for the patrons. There's full stand-up clips not available anywhere else. Drew and I do a bonus podcast, and there's insider info on all kinds of upcoming productions and projects. I got a documentary that the public doesn't know a thing about yet, but patrons do. Patreon.com/romplacone. Even $1 a month goes a long way. You get it. All right. We are a little bit closer to 60. And by the way, October, there's a theme in October. We're going to be doing stuff in the political realm because an election is coming up very, very soon. And we're going to be doing stuff in the horror realm because it's October. I guess in short, we're going to be doing things in the horror realm. See you next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.